Hey everyone, this is Len. I said yesterday if I could get $100 on my Ko-fi page before rent was due on the 5th, I would do a Dev Diary breakdown of this pretty lengthy Crusader Kings sort of design philosophy Dev Diary. And I made more than $300 in like 10 minutes. So thank you to everybody who helped me out with the month of April, which sucks for taxes if you're a self-employed person in I am due to the fact that how our tax system works, it just screws you over if you want to be your own boss, which I kind of am as a creator. Anyway, won't dwell on that. Just wanted to say thanks to everybody who made this video possible. And we're going to do this in one take. So, this is Dev Diary 147 for Crusader Kings 3. Some words from our game director, written by Rager, Alex Oltner. Good guy. I've known him since he was working on DLC for 2. Um, I've had drinks with him a few times. We disagree about some things philosophically in terms of the design of game itself. I still really enjoy Crusader, despite the criticisms I have of it. So he says, "Greetings. This dev diary will be a mixed bag of various things. There's a lot going on, and therefore a lot to talk about. I want to take this opportunity to address feedback, talk design philosophy, shine some light on how we're working. I said we're going to do it in one take. Set some expectations for Roads to Power, big DLC coming later this year that's adding landless characters. Tease some things coming in the future and show off the 1.12 changelog update happening on the 8th. In other words, this will be a big and a little bit all over the place diary, but bear with me. So, um, I don't think it's a big shock to anybody who has been paying attention that Legends of the Dead was a little bit controversial in terms of things that it added. Personally, I found plagues were definitely a little bit too spammy. Um, and Legends, for me, speaking as me, Len, I'll try to distinguish from when I'm quoting the dev diary, uh, fell completely flat. Like at this point, I wish I could turn them off. Honestly, that's that's kind of where I'm at with the whole Legends mechanic. Um, I feel like I would prefer to just not have them. Um, be brutally honest. So anyway, Alex says plagues is the feature that's been the easiest to collect an action feedback for, even if various types of feedback are sometimes conflated and need to be untangled. Yeah, blah blah blah. So basically, what they're doing is almost exactly what I would have wanted them to do, which is they're decreasing the frequency of plagues by 30 to 50% according to the patch notes. They're making minor plagues significantly less frequent, and they're making the major and apocalyptic plagues a little bit more frequent, which is really like about like chef kiss for me. Like it's almost exactly what I would have done. They're also reducing the notification spam you're going to get, where um, you'll only be notified about plagues and get like the pop up to isolate your capital or whatever if it's within, they say, about one Ireland of your capital, or your domain, your personal. So if you rule a giant, continent spanning empire, and if your capital's in Sri Lanka, you're not going to necessarily get notified up in Nepal or something, which is great. I like the idea of plagues overall. I just thought the implementation of that launch was, so yeah, that's really good. They also fixed the alms event, which apparently was triggering more often than it could due to a bug. Okay. Legends. Alex says legends are a completely different beast altogether and are much harder to collect feedback for. Opinions on what to do or change differ widely at this point in time. Of course, we're aware of the general sentiment surrounding the feature, which is why we're still looking as much feedback as we can. The update we deployed close to release targeted some widely agreed upon points of feedback, such as adding a legend library where you can see completed legends forever, which is great. That was so weird to me that legends would just disappear and then you would could never even get them again. And more reactive variations in chapter text to things your character does, such as battles having children, among things. For this update, we've mainly improved the Legends map mode as it's or we found it uninspiring and not pleasant to look at due to the limited color palette. Similar colors blend together. This does look more readable. I'm also seeing that they've changed the dynamic naming from Great Deed for Dynasty. It's now A Mighty Endeavor for Dynasty, which I think is a little better. Just seeing like Great Deed for Carling, like that just sounded like a Mad Lib, like AI generated text. I didn't really like it. Yeah, some people think they're underpowered and useless. Some people think they're overpowered and way too good. I don't think I'm in either camp there necessarily. I just find them kind of unnecessary and annoying. And it looks like there's going to be some tools added that will allow me to ignore them if I want to, which is nice. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Dev Diary. I just think it kind of fell flat for me. I do think, um, with how legitimacy currently works, you're not engaging with the legend system, it can feel uh, a little bit unnecessarily difficult to keep your legitimacy high. To the point that I think people playing with the free legitimacy feature who don't have the Legends of the Dead DLC ended up having a much different experience of like what even legitimacy is than people who do have the DLC. I think it's kind of trivial to keep your legitimacy up if you're always promoting legends, and it's kind of a pain if you don't have access to that feature at all. So that's something of like a balance issue that maybe um yeah Alex also mentions that people have compared them to the bloodlines in CK2, which was actually a feature he created, but that was meant to be more of a fantasy feature, whereas CK3 Legends were designed to mimic what medieval rulers actually did, embellish otherwise mundane stories into epics of great renown. I actually agree with this. I didn't really like Bloodlines in CK2, to be honest with you. I like the more grounded approach of CK3. I know not everyone does. Maybe it should be a game rule at some point in the future, but like for me, even like there are even events in CK3 where I'm like, this is stupid. This shouldn't be in the game. Like where somebody can get eaten by a koi fish. Like that's a silly fucking event. Like I don't want that. Like that is over the line of silliness for me. I don't want that in my game. So I agree with having the more realistic, grounded focus. But I wouldn't mind if it was a game rule to have some more supernatural or sillier stuff eventually someday maybe. Um, Yeah, so Alex says, truth be told, I think the problem with Legends lies less in the feature itself and more in how we communicated them in dev diaries and similar. I don't know if I agree with that because I've played around with it a lot and I enjoy it as a feature. I don't feel like that has a lot to do with what my expectations of it were going in. I think it's just kind of it's a miss for me, if I'm being honest about it. It's not something I really enjoy interacting after the first maybe 10 hours of oh new shiny. I do like the ones that like are historical callbacks because I think that adds richness to the setting, like the idea that I can claim to be the heir of Arthur Pendragon. That's actually cool. I would keep those. But the ones that are just like great deed for dynasty name, like just like it gets old fast. Not a big fan. Maybe a game rule that you could turn historical legends on and dynamically generated legends off. I would use that game rule. So bettering the game. Um, Alex kind of goes into some details about what are called balance days, where they have a big sheet of game balance areas to review or add to. Currently, these days are focused on improving some older content we've released, as well as doing balance passes on resources such as prestige and game components such as cultural traditions. By the way, reading the patch notes for this May 8th patch, which are out and are public, I'm pretty sure I'm not breaking any NDAs here. Um, the changes to like the amount of prestige you can earn from like travel events and stuff, excellent, excellent. They needed to be brought way down, and they have been brought way down. It was way too easy with tours and tournaments to just have infinite prestige every with every character. So yeah, they've hugely tuned that down, and that is exactly what I would have done. That's a great shame. So Alex continues on. The main philosophy we're following when reviewing old content is to balance it for fun. A piece of content isn't already engaging, flavorful, interesting, or fulfilling a specific purpose, then it needs to at least be made entertaining or useful. Right now, we're working on updating court events from Royal Court, which is great because that is definitely something where at this point I kind of just click through because I've seen them all and they're not super interesting. Um, he says, as for prestige, we've also taken a look at what causes the AI to go into prestige debt and thus be unable to declare war. I didn't realize that was happening, but that makes a lot of sense with how the AI has seemed really passive uh, lately. Um, all in order to make it more challenging and not feel as inert. Many cultural traditions presented very small or narrow trade offs that players would rarely choose. We decided to change our philosophy to work with larger buffs and more significant slash interesting trade offs. That also sounds great. I want to see the numbers. I want to see what they look like. But yeah, there are a lot of cultural traditions that I just would never pick up because they didn't seem like worth like using a slot. Um, yeah, updating older content or doing large balance passes is always on the radar and will often arrive together with larger updates. All of what I mentioned here, court events, AI prestige debt, and cultural tradition balance will arrive alongside Road to Power. So, not in the May patch, but later this year. The changes to like player earned prestige, though, that is in the patch that's May. At least it's in the patch notes. Yeah. So they talk. He talks a little bit about fix weeks, improvement days. Much of our time is spent making the game better, and we're constantly evaluating how we're working to see how we best we can, as much as we can. Um, Common topic that I see discussed in many places is the frequency of events that they can feel spammy. Yes, I would agree with this. Not necessarily because there's always too much of them at once, although that certainly happens every now and then, but because you often see same events often. More insignificant or punishing or random event uh, is the less often you want to see it happen. Having a flavorful situation appear now and then is fine, but being blocked by a challenger on the road or hearing a duck quack several times per character feels off. Um, so he's talking about changing the um, ratio between uh, general events and niche events, where um, you know currently, let me make sure that I understand this paragraph because I read this yesterday morning originally, and I might not have absorbed all of it. What we're looking at is a combination of more significant cooldowns and a new system to restrict certain events for some characters you play. Could have the following effects. So, uh, you would see the same events way less often. Pro, you would have more varied general event content between characters. In Pro, rare events would be somewhat more visible due to fewer general events being valid. So basically, the cooldown on the events that you get all the time is being increased. Is I believe what they're discussing, changing here, which would mean that when an event does come up, that pool of events you've seen, 100 times a lot of them would be on cooldown, so it might end up picking a more rare event that I've seen. I think there's a bunch of events that in CK3 that even with like almost 600 hours in the game that I've actually never seen, because the triggers for them are just so rare. He says a con of this would be some event pools might give you less event content over time. Might be a pro for some of you. The way I interpret that, and I could be wrong, is that if everything's on cooldown, the event just won't fire, which means you won't get as many events. Which I think for me would actually be a pro because I do feel like events are a little bit spammy right now. That doesn't necessarily seem like fun to me. Yeah. So um I'll have to see how this plays out, but I like in theory the where they're going with it. Yeah, for easy to happen triggers, what we could do is simply increase this cooldown. Yeah, so it used to be about 5 to 10. Um, you could make an event that would only be valid for 50% of characters, so you're not seeing in every lifetime. Uh, yeah, so I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, this I really like, where they're talking about updates to message settings. I want this in every grand strategy game. Honestly, I want to be able to choose if it pauses the game. I want to be able to choose what kind of a notification it is. And I was discussing earlier how I would like to maybe be able to avoid interacting with legends when I don't want to. So if I can just turn off all the notifications for legends, that would honestly be that would solve a lot of the problem. It wouldn't solve the entire problem because I think you're still going to have people bugging me to um ask me to promote their legend or whatever, which I would like to maybe be able to turn that off. Like don't talk to me. No soliciting. If you're here to ask me to promote a legend, hit the bricks because I'm not interested. um but yeah, stuff like auto pausing with sieges, or auto pausing when a war happens, or auto pausing when a rebellion happens. Anything where like it's going to matter how many ticks it takes me to react to it, I would like you to pause the game. I don't want the rebels to even start sieging the province before I have time to raise my armies. And so, yeah, I like this. I will be using these message settings a lot. And there's a lot of stuff that every Paradox game seems to think that I will be interested in that I'm really not. I just want to be like, yeah, stick it in the feed or just don't tell me about it. Like I don't care. So yeah, this should be in every Paradox. All right, so philosophy of free. This is something I have talked about quite a bit. I think as players, we have it really good when it comes to Crusader Kings 3. And some people are surprised to hear me say this, but I think it's an extremely consumer friendly model. Because generally, this was the case with tours and tournaments, this was the case with um, Legends of the Dead. The free patches are absolute fire. The stuff everybody gets is kind of incredible. I mean, if you think about like even Royal Court, which, not everybody loved the paid features, but like it came with the culture system rework, which was basically a flavor expansion for the entire world. You know, like if you put together what was in the DLC and what was in the free patch, every CK3 DLC would be a banger, like relatively speaking. The problem is with this philosophy, they've put themselves in a weird position because often I will look at the paid features and be like, if I'm solely looking at what you're paying for, what you get access to from buying the DLC, is this worth $30? Not really. I personally have the philosophy that it's kind of a tip that I pay to Paradox. It's my CK3 tax because I knew that it funded the free patch, which is amazing, and that this free patch would not exist if they weren't selling you know, $30 throne room DLC. I understand why this annoys people. I really do. I don't think it's like you're way out of pocket for being annoyed by this. But they're in a weird position because I think they're doing, in my mind, they're doing the right thing. And I wouldn't want them to change this strategy. Um, but it's always going to annoy people because what comes in the DLC not as good as what comes in free patch. So here's what Alex says about it. When developing expansions, you have to make many calls of what should be paid and what should be free. Back in the day, I've worked at Paradox for 10 years now. Time truly flies. We were not very good at determining what could be paid and what should be free. This had several unfortunate side effects. Players who didn't have certain expansions would be alienated. Us developers would have to spend time supporting multiple parallel systems within the same game, including all manner of permutations between different expansion combinations, and it sometimes made it harder to further develop popular systems. As a company, we develop games that can live for a very, very long time. This implies a lot of work keeping the game healthy by updating features, fixing issues, doing balance work, and other things that aren't just about making new expansions. Over the years, we've started to make more and more base systems free at their core, which is something that came from listening to you in the community. The reason why we're doing this is because we want your experience to be better, for the game to be healthy, for systems to be more accessible to modders, and so we can update areas of the game that we feel would simply make the experience better. Alleviates the unfortunate side effects I mentioned above. It talks about modding support, which, by the way, just because of something that was added in a mod jam, apparently we're now getting dragons and CK3 got mod, which is amazing. That I was gonna wait to play it until they added dragons. Sounds like that's coming. Dynamically aging dragon. Holy shit. Um, Alex continues. Now, we don't aim for a fixed ratio between free or paid. We aim to make the game better in as many different ways as we can. We don't want to lock systems away if they'd make more sense free. Sometimes this means we'll be making free features than paid ones in an update. Sometimes more paid ones than free. It depends on what the update is about. Important to note that we have limited time. The time to make free and paid features come out of the same pool. By choosing to make more paid features, we'd be making fewer free ones. That could ultimately hurt the game, which is why I want to reinforce that I don't want to change how we work. And I agree with him here. I don't think that they should change the way they're doing it. I believe that it's important for the game and community that certain things are free to avoid divides and splits and to keep the game in good shape. We, like you, are fans of the game and we want to make it as good as it can be. Paid features exist in order to fund continued development. They are not goals in and of themselves. It's together with you in the community that we decided to have this philosophy, and I strongly believe it. I kind of feel like this is sort of like that Churchill quote about, democracy is the worst form of government except all the other ones that have been tried. I think Crusader Kings 3's DLC policy is the worst DLC policy except for all of the other ones that have been tried. Um, all of the DLCs are fairly optional. They're a bit pricey. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know that I would price them that myself. But I also believe in this philosophy, and I hope they're allowed to continue to do it. I hope things like review bombing DLCs on Steam does not, scare the business people and discourage them from doing this, because I think we're living in like one of the best possible realities right now for CK3 in terms of ongoing content and free patches and DLC and support. This is the way to do it, I think. I mean, the alternative would just be moving entirely to a subscription model where everybody gets the same updates, but you have to pay a subscription to play the game. And I don't think that really works. Or they go back to the old way where it's like these huge critical core systems are locked to DLC, so they can't be fully integrated into, and they can't really balance around it, and they can't really assume everyone has access to it, which limits what other kinds of free things. I understand why you might be annoyed at it, but I think honestly it's better than all of the alternatives I can think of. They can't just continue supporting a niche strategy game for 10 years for free. They have to make they have to keep paying the bills somehow, and I think they've found a good way. Okay, a challenging game. I don't want to say this was a direct response to things I said on Twitter, but I feel like maybe it was at least partially a response to some things I said on Twitter about how CK3 is just it's not a challenging. If you played a lot of CK2, it is not a challenging game. At least in my opinion, I think it's way easier. Early on in development, they said something about like, "Oh, we want any new player to be able to pick up any count and become an emperor," and that was like an oh no moment. Like, I think newer players should be given more modest goals to strive for, and I think you should have to do what we all had to do with CK2, where you fail for like 150 hours before you finally click that form empire button. Um, that's how I feel like it should be. Like I feel like if you want to have your nice little duchy or kingdom and just kind of play tall and hang out and have a good time role playing, I think that should be a very approachable experience. I think if you want to be an emperor or if you want to like conquer all of Europe, you should have to get a little bit sweaty. Like it's not hard enough right now to do those kinds of things. Um, but here's Alex's take on it. The difficulty of the game is a topic that's often brought up. The truth is that CK3 is not a particularly hard game when you've mastered it. And that's something we've always been fine with, seeing as, unlike other GSGs, we're focusing more on stories and dynamically evolving narratives. I would partially push back here with something somebody said on the Three Moves Ahead Discord, which is that a lack of challenge is actually bad for role playing. Because if all of these geopolitical goals are much easier to achieve than they would have been in actual history. As a role player, that bugs me because I want things that would have been hard to do in history to be hard to do in the game because that's immersive. If there are pushbacks that feel authentic, that prevent me from doing crazy shit, that's a role play feature. It's not just for the min maxers of the world, which I definitely am not. I'm a role player, likes challenge. Um, anyway, Alex continues. That said, if the game is too easy or systems are too trivial to overcome, that impacts the quality of the stories. Okay, so he did also kind of hit on what I just said. Therefore, I'd like to explain my philosophy regarding what difficulty in CK3 should be. I'm not a fan of traditional hard difficulties where all AIs are simply given extra resources and bonuses the player cannot get. I agree. Or alternatively, the player is hit with a series of nerfs and inefficiencies that feel artificial and forced. I agree. I like when difficulty is immersive and opt in. It shouldn't get in the way of you telling stories up to a certain degree by the AI only doing objectively good things such as stacking wars, spamming murder schemes, etc. It should help you create stories of triumph or stories of overcoming hardship. The AI is there to immerse you in the game and to provide an enjoyable challenge. Unlike the player, the AI cannot game over and should therefore focus on immersion over pure survival, although it should obviously not be vital as that's immersive. As we want the AI to play in an immersive way where they don't always take optimal, I think is I agree that they shouldn't. Try to be wary of changing the overarching difficulty. Harder overall will always hit the AI harder than the player, as the player can more easily adapt. There are systems that are easier to change than others to introduce more challenges to the player without inadvertently making the game harder for the AI. For example, the AI will almost always marry for alliances or prestige, never for genetics. Means that if we were to make it more of a challenge to reinforce good genetic traits, which is on our radar, but perhaps not for roads to power, it would barely harm the AI at all. Of course, this isn't true for most systems, which is why we also always need to be careful. We change things, we try to think of what implications it'll have for the AI so that we don't inadvertently make it challenging. Many things relate to adding more challenges that relate to adding more challenges are present on the balance sheet I mentioned earlier in this diary, how we work. Um, so he says, now difficulty comes in different flavors. One of these flavors is to optimize your resources to overcome challenges. This is when you use your gold, prestige, lands, vassals, etc., to outcompete rivals and neighbors. The lack of mid to late game AI challengers makes difficulty peter out quickly after you've formed a decently sized realm. Another flavor of difficulty is to overcome specific challenges where the rules you play by are different and not controlled by you. This is when you guide a blind 4-year-old through a viper's nest of rivals in order to reach adulthood and subsequently thrive. This is a more uniquely free thing. The fact that you have a lot of control over education, inheritance, and that you're restricted to a direct line of inheritance makes it so challenged less often. Um, yeah, um, I think the piece that's missing here, the vector of difficulty that's missing here, is I think internal challenges should scale up more with the size of your realm, which they currently kind of don't. Like theoretically, maybe they should because you have more vassals to deal with, or you have more powerful vassals to deal with once you start creating like king tier vassals and stuff. But my philosophy has always been number one, if I'm playing the game well, I don't want to be punished by you taking all the challenge away. Um, which is kind of the classic snowballing problem, right? Like if I am playing the game well, what I'm telling you, what I as a player, I'm telling you as a developer is I need a more challenging experience. The obstacles you have put in front of me are not challenging. Um, so if becoming an emperor makes the game feel way easier than it was when I was a duke, obviously there should be some trade-off there because like okay, it's less likely that I'm going to get conquered. That's just obvious. But if it's harder to play as an emperor than it is to play as a duke, that's a really unsatisfying difficulty curve because that means I'm a skilled player who has um you know has mastered all the challenges you've put in front of me, and then you've kind of in my eyes you've punished me at that point by making the game easier. And what I want and what I need is more challenge. My philosophy as, at this point an amateur game designer, I am learning how to do this stuff. I've been learning to code since November of last year. I have pages and pages of design documents. Is that like if the core premise of your game is ruling a realm, internal pressure needs to scale up directly as external pressure decreases. And that's why the solution they're about to talk about is not necessarily the way I would go about this at all. I think ruling a realm, keeping the realm together as an emperor, should be a lot harder. And the bigger you get, the harder it should be. And I don't think this would punish the AI more than the player necessarily because it kind of makes sense that big AI empires should break up after, maybe their Turbo Chad ruler dies or something like that. That's what I think is missing from CK3 is that when I have achieved these heights of power, I don't feel like there's a lot of challenge inside my realm. Rather than we're about to talk about conquerors, which is the way they're wanting to solve that. It's like, no, I would much rather you have, rather than somebody outside my realm getting tagged as a conqueror, I would rather have somebody inside my realm getting tagged as like my nemesis. And like he's going to do whatever to bring me down. I know rivals are already a thing, but like give him a bunch of bonuses or something. Give him, an increase to invite to scheme power or increased troops for a dissolution faction. I want to be fighting like big civil wars and stuff. Like I want that challenge. You can make it opt in. He talked about wanting difficulty to be opt in. You can make it a game, but like I want more internal pressure when I don't have credible threats on my borders. That's when the crows start to circle. It's like we don't have big wars outside our borders to distract everyone. People aren't being given land for their third and fourth and fifth sons. They don't have anywhere to settle their soldiers. We don't have a foreign enemy to use as a boogeyman for everyone to unite around. So everyone's just going to start picking apart what's already here. They want a bigger slice of the existing pie. That's how I would do it. But here's one way that they're doing it. Conquerors is going to be a new game rule. Alex says when certain rulers, either because of historical reasons or in-game suitability, are granted special bonuses and a new way of interacting with the world. The Middle Ages are full of conquerors who forged large empires, which often fell. Ghaznavids, Ayyubids, etc. I wanted something like this for CK. Dynamic challengers controlled in detail by game rules can rival players in efficiency while being immersive and flavorful. Conquerors switch over to hyper-aggressive version of the AI, which is much faster to declare wars, can declare multiple wars at once, invest all of their resources into warfare, men-at-arms, and means in which there are more and better wars, such as hunt activities if they're low on prestige, or special bonuses, game rules, or taxation tiers of gold. Yeah, there's like a base version of Conquerors. They'll have more loyal vassals. They'll get some free troops. Claimants will flock to their court. They have resistance to hostile schemes, lower title creation costs, lower men at arms maintenance, added legitimacy, and the conqueror trait can be passed down to their heirs, but it will be based on the heirs' personality traits. They might not get it. There's also a super version of this called Scourge of the Gods. I hope the historical Mongol invasion will just have this by default with Temujin, where they get a huge health boost, siege phase time reduction, tactical advantage, a bunch of stuff. Very scary. End game crisis type stuff. This is a step in the right direction in terms of difficulty, but it's just, as I said, this is not the direction I would have attacked the difficulty problem in. So, I like this feature, but I don't know if it's necessarily what I would have done. This, on the other hand, I really like. Choose a new destiny. Basically, other than your primary heir, you're going to have the choice to select from 3 other dynasty members. I kind of wish it was more than 3. I kind of hope that it can be modded to maybe be like even 8 or 9 or 10, based on how interesting the game chooses them to be. You see a brothers, cousins, some reasons that they might be deemed interesting in game are high learning, more skillful than the heir, holds important claims, holds pressed claims, has virtuous traits, experience as a wise man, capital is a holy site, is a ruler in foreign lands. I like this a lot. I like the idea that I can choose who I want to play. My ruler dies, at least out of a few different people in my dynasty. I think that's going to be really cool for stuff where like you want to play as the virtuous younger brother versus like the dickhead older brother that nobody likes, and fight a big civil war to claim the throne from him. I really like this. There's still ways that the base design of CK3 is kind of iffy in this regard. Like retinues being tied to the direct player heir, where like if that's something that you built up over hundreds of years and now you don't have it anymore, like I don't know. It's a little bit non-immersive, but like I feel like if I've invested a lot in a retinue, the retinue should sort of follow me as the player. Like maybe they swear allegiance to the new like character that I'm playing as or something. Because otherwise that just feels really bad. Like lose that and have to rebuild it. But, I really like this idea overall. The last little section here is on the road to power. Alex says, as I've seen a lot of discussions about how adventurers will play, I thought I'd give a bit of a brief overview of how we're designing them. will not be exhaustive, but I think it's interesting to share what we see experience. Playing as an average adventurer will be a zero to hero experience. I love it. A completely separate experience from how you play a landed character, where you work your way up in the world. You will travel a lot and accumulate resources to improve your standing. It won't be easy to gain land, depending on the goals you set for yourself. Gaining a small plot of land will naturally not be as difficult as doing something epic like invading a kingdom, except if you're an adventurer with the special legitimist purpose that you can amass a big army and lots of support quickly. This will be rare, though. I assume this will be someone with like a strong claim, that's raising an army to reclaim their birthright, which is absolutely something I would love to see. It'll also definitely be possible to play as a multi generational adventurer should you have to become land. Yeah, so we got some screenshots from the Roads to Power update. They're adding an 1178 bookmark. So that's got Saladin, Richard the Lionheart, a lot of the famous Crusaders. I probably won't play it because the part of the Middle Ages that interests me the most is the early Middle Ages. At the point that it became very clear where which way Scandinavia was going to go between paganism and Christendom, I feel like we've already lost. So what's the point? But yeah, I think it's cool that they've added sort of a more high medieval start. I would love to see Iron Century come back because then you'd have start date in the 800s, the 900s, the 1000s, and the 1100s. As weird as it kind of is with Crusader Kings mechanics, I really do want 769 back someday, just because it felt like you could be there at the dawn of the Viking Age. It wasn't like, oh, I'm claiming to be the son of Ragnar. It's like, no, you are Ragnar. You get to kick it off. You get to be the one who raids Lindisfarne. And just even though it's called Crusader Kings, I feel like it's become as much of a Viking game at this point as it is a Crusades game. So I liked the ability to be there at the dawn of the Viking Age. So I would like to see that start. Um, yeah, Saladin's the man. He's a cool dude. Richard the Lionheart's pretty cool. They're showing off the manor screen also for administrative governments. Got a mansion, a fortified watchtower, storehouse, and hay barracks. Every dynasty or every house? Every house in an administrative government can have one of these. The house head um, controls it, which is cool. So yeah, I'm really interested in seeing more on how administrative governments. We go on to the patch notes. I really like this kind of dev diary. I really like this openness. I feel like this was partly inspired by the Tinto talks of announcing stuff earlier, talking about stuff earlier, setting expectations, going into more detail. Is not something the CK3 team has really done much prior to now. But I really like this. I really like this way of doing dev diary. And I like leaving the door open to collect feedback on stuff before it's finalized, which I think has happened quite a few times already with Project C. I'm just going to call it Eve, Project C, whatever. Um, and I think that EU5 will be a better game because of that, for sure. So, yeah, CK3 I think is in a good place overall. It's kind of in a weird place with the most recent DLC because Plagues had some issues and Legends were just a miss for me. I feel like it's on a little bit of a weird footing right now, but it's still a game I really enjoy. Um, I've played almost as many hours in CK3 as I have in Stellaris, and Stellaris came out 3 years earlier. So it's not like Victoria 3 where I'm like, I don't. I might come back. I might check out the DLC, but I honestly don't know if I'm gonna. Um, Kind of like Imperator was, where I reached a point that I kind of feel done with it, at least at this point, and they would have to make some fairly huge, like low level changes to get me interested again. I don't feel that way about CK. I love it. Really excited about mods. Really excited to dive into like Game of Thrones after the end. Um, there's a Warhammer mod. There's an Elder Scrolls mod. Like I think I'll be playing CK3 for many years. It's just kind of in a weird spot right now. But yeah, hopefully Roads to Power will just absolutely slap. Um, anyway, that is gonna do it for this Dev Diary breakdown. I'm Till Folkfong on Twitter. I'm just Len, Len on Blue Sky, and yeah, thanks to everybody who helped me out with May rent and made this video possible. See you next time.